Throughout history, royal women have been taught one lesson above all others: obedience. Obey your parents, obey your husband, obey the rules of the court. Accept your cage and smile while doing it. But what happens when a princess refuses? When she chooses passion over propriety, love over duty, and freedom over everything the crown demands? On a cold spring night in 1898, in a small town in Croatia, Austrian police surrounded a castle. Inside was Princess Louise of Belgium, daughter of one of Europe's most powerful kings, hiding with the man she loved. Within hours, she would be torn from his arms and dragged across borders. He would be thrown into prison for fraud. And she? She would be declared insane and locked away in an asylum for 6 years. Her crime was not madness, it was defiance. Louise had abandoned her royal husband for a penniless Croatian officer. She had spent fortunes she didn't have. She had scandalized every court in Europe. And when her family decided she had gone too far, they did what powerful families have always done with inconvenient women. They made her disappear. But Louise refused to disappear quietly. Her lover staged a daring midnight escape worthy of a spy novel. Her fight for freedom became an international sensation. And her story revealed a truth the royal courts desperately wanted hidden: that the line between sanity and insanity, between freedom and imprisonment, was decided not by doctors, but by men with power and reputations to protect. This is the story of Princess Louise of Belgium, the beauty who became a scandal, the mother who lost her children, the woman who chose love and paid for it with years of her life locked in rooms with barred windows. A story of passion, betrayal, and one princess's refusal to be broken by the gilded cage that tried to contain her. Louise Marie Amélie was born on February 18, 1858, at the Palace of Laeken in Brussels, the first child of Leopold II of Belgium and Marie Henriette of Austria. Her arrival was a disappointment. Her father had wanted a son, an heir to secure his newly established dynasty. Instead, he got a daughter with dark eyes and, as he cruelly noted, his own large nose. From birth, Louise understood she was not what her parents had hoped for. Her father, Leopold II, was cold, distant, consumed by ambitions that had nothing to do with fatherly love. He would become one of history's most brutal colonial exploiters, the personal owner of the Congo Free State, where millions would die under his reign of terror. But to his daughters, he was simply a man who barely noticed them, who saw them as pawns to be married off for political advantage. Her mother, Marie Henriette, tried to compensate with strict discipline. She raised her children in the English fashion: sparse bedrooms that looked more like convent cells than royal chambers, rigid routines, harsh punishments. Louise and her siblings were made to kneel on dried peas for hours when they misbehaved. They were locked in dark rooms for days. Marie Henriette loved her children, but her love was expressed through control, not comfort. Then in 1859, everything changed. Louise's brother Leopold was born, the longed-for male heir. Finally, her father had his son. Finally, the dynasty seemed secure. For 6-year-old Louise, it meant she became even more invisible, just another princess in a palace that only valued boys. She grew up watching her parents' loveless marriage crumble. Leopold II disappeared into his colonial schemes and his mistresses. Marie Henriette retreated into horses and melancholy. The palace at Laeken felt less like a home and more like a prison of protocol and silence. Louise, curious and sharp-tongued, earned the nickname Madame Pourquoi, Miss Why, because she asked too many questions. She wanted to understand the world, but princesses weren't supposed to ask questions. They were supposed to smile and obey. In 1868, when Louise was 10 years old, tragedy struck. Her beloved brother Leopold fell into a pond in the palace gardens. He developed pneumonia, then acute pericarditis. For months, the family watched him suffer. On January 22nd, 1869, the 9-year-old heir died in his mother's arms. Louise would later write that she felt cursed by God that day. The brother who had been everything to her was gone. Her mother sank into depression from which she would never fully recover. Her father turned even more bitter, denied once again the male successor he desperately needed. And Louise learned a lesson that would shape her entire life, that love brings only pain, and that royal duty devours everything beautiful. She was 15 years old when her parents decided it was time to marry her off. The candidate was Prince Philip of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, her second cousin, and a man 14 years her senior. He was wealthy, well-connected, and politically useful. That was all that mattered. No one asked Louise what she wanted. No one explained to her what marriage actually meant. On February 4th, 1875, 2 weeks before her 17th birthday, Louise married Philip in Brussels. The wedding was everything a royal ceremony should be: grand, glittering, perfect. But that night, in the bedroom, everything went horribly wrong. No one had prepared Louise for what would happen on her wedding night. In an age when well-bred girls were kept deliberately ignorant about sex, Louise walked into that bedroom completely naive. What followed was traumatic enough that she fled, barefoot and in her nightgown, into the palace greenhouses, where a sentry found her sobbing among the camellias. She later wrote that she was bruised and mangled in her soul, left more dead than alive. Her mother tried to comfort her. Her father didn't even bother getting out of bed. They sent her back to her husband. This was marriage. This was duty. She would have to endure it. Louise and Philip moved to Vienna, where they settled into the glittering court of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth. She had 2 children, Leopold Clement in 1878 and Dorothea in 1881. During Dorothea's birth, Louise hid her labor pains as long as possible, desperate to keep Philip away. When the midwife finally arrived, it was too late. Louise gave birth alone, exactly as she wanted. Her marriage was a disaster from the start. Philip was a hedonist who saw his young wife as property to be molded to his tastes. He gave her erotic books to read, showed her his collection of Japanese pornography, tried to introduce her to sexual practices that horrified her. He was unfaithful constantly and unapologetically. In Vienna's permissive, aristocratic culture, his affairs were expected, even admired. But when Louise began having her own affairs, it was scandal. Double standards ruled the Habsburg court. Men could do as they pleased. Women who strayed were whores. Louise didn't care. If she was trapped in this marriage, she would at least take what pleasure she could find. She threw herself into Vienna's social whirl with a vengeance. She became known for her beauty, her sharp wit, her biting satire that could reduce nobles to ridicule. She spent money wildly, accumulated debts, and collected lovers like jewels. Her first serious affair was with Baron Nicholas Dury de Jobahasa. When her family discovered it, they forced it to end. Her mother, Queen Marie Henriette, wrote desperate letters begging Louise to return to her husband and live a Christian life. The world, she warned, was hungry for scandals, but Louise was already beyond saving in her family's eyes. Emperor Franz Joseph himself grew tired of her behavior. One of his brothers accused her of keeping bad company. When the emperor sided with his brother instead of defending her, Louise lost imperial favor. She begged Philippe to defend her honor, to duel the archduke who had slandered her. He refused. It was the final humiliation. Louise told Philippe they should travel for a year, and if things didn't improve, they should separate. Both knew the marriage was dead. They began living separate lives under the same roof, maintaining appearances while hating each other. She called him der Dicke, the fat one. He called her insane. Then in May 1895, everything changed. Louise met the man who would destroy her life and save it at the same time. His name was Geza Matacic Keglevich, and he was everything Louise's life had lacked: passion, romance, danger. He was a Croatian lieutenant in the Austro-Hungarian army, 9 years younger than Louise, handsome and ambitious. His title was questionable. He'd taken the surname Keglevich from his mother's lover, not his own father. His prospects were limited. He was nobody, really, compared to a princess. But he was obsessed with her. He had watched her taking her daily rides in the Prater, Vienna's famous park. When their eyes met, he became determined to make her his. He seduced her maid to use her as a go-between. He followed Louise to an Adriatic resort, crashed a party where she was guest, and appeared beneath her bedroom window. 2 nights later, he climbed through that window. His confidence was rewarded. Louise fell completely under his spell. She appointed him master of her private stables, a public declaration of their affair that shocked Vienna. The court was scandalized. Emperor Franz Joseph summoned her and, in no uncertain terms, ordered her to end the relationship and leave Vienna until the scandal died down. Louise nodded obediently. Then she ran straight to Matacic. In January 1897, Louise did the unthinkable. She left her husband permanently, taking her daughter Dorothea with her. She and Matacic fled to Paris, then to Cannes, then to the French Riviera, living in a rented mansion called the Villa Paradiso. Paradise indeed. They lived like royalty without responsibilities, spending money they didn't have, buying everything on credit, convinced that eventually Philip or Leopold II would pay the bills to avoid further scandal. Initially, Philip did pay, desperate to prevent the humiliation from growing worse, but Louise's debts spiraled out of control. She borrowed enormous sums from jewelers and merchants, signed promissory notes she had no way of honoring, and kept spending. Meanwhile, her son Leopold, furious that his mother's behavior was ruining his chances of inheritance, turned against her completely. Her daughter Dorothea, advised by her fiancé, the Duke of Schleswig-Holstein, left her mother and returned to Vienna. Louise was alone with Matacic, and the walls were closing in. Then came the duel. In 1898, Philip challenged Matacic to settle the matter like gentlemen. They fought first with pistols, then with swords. Matacic won, wounding Philippe and sparing his life. It should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, it was the beginning of Louise's nightmare. The financial situation had become impossible to hide. Bills were going unpaid. Creditors were demanding payment. In a desperate attempt to secure funds, someone forged the signature of Louise's sister, Crown Princess Stephanie of Austria, on documents worth $2.5 million. Whether Louise knew about the forgery remains unclear. Whether Matacic was actually guilty has been debated ever since, but it didn't matter. The Habsburg and Belgian courts had been looking for an excuse to end this scandal once and for all. They had found it. In May 1898, Austrian authorities arrested Matacic in Zagreb and charged him with fraud. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. And Louise? They came for her in the middle of the night. She was seized from her bed at the castle in Croatia, where she'd taken refuge, and transported across borders to Vienna. There, her husband and father had prepared her fate. She was brought to a private clinic in Dublin for psychiatric evaluation. The doctors, under pressure from Prince Philip and Emperor Franz Joseph, diagnosed her with sentimental madness. Her symptoms: romantic impulsivity, emotional volatility, refusal to submit to her husband, excessive spending, scandalous affairs. In other words, she was declared insane for being a woman who wouldn't obey. The diagnosis was a convenience, a legal fiction that allowed them to lock her away without trial. Louise signed documents admitting herself to the asylum, but only under duress and manipulation. She believed she was agreeing to a brief stay in a rest home. Instead, from the first day, she found herself a prisoner in a mental institution. She was transferred from Dublin to the Rudinger Asylum in Parkersdorf, then to the Lindenhof Sanatorium near Coswig in Saxony. Each facility was more isolated than the last. The guards were strict. Visitors were almost non-existent. Her father, Leopold II, sent orders to strictly guard this female patient. When Austrian public opinion began to sympathize with the beautiful princess locked away, they moved her across borders to keep her hidden. For 6 years, Louise lived behind barred windows. She wore the same clothes day after day. She walked in small circles in courtyards under constant surveillance. She wrote letters that were censored or destroyed. She saw her daughter Dorothea only once, and the visit was brief and cold. Her mother never came. Her father wanted nothing to do with her. Her sister Stephanie tried to help, but was threatened by Emperor Franz Joseph to stay away. The only comfort Louise had was the knowledge that Matacich was suffering too, imprisoned in a cell for a crime that most believed he hadn't committed. It was this shared suffering that kept her sane, or perhaps drove her further into the despair the doctors claimed proved her madness. But outside those asylum walls, something was changing. Public opinion was turning. Newspapers began asking uncomfortable questions. Was the Princess of Belgium truly insane? Or had she been locked away because powerful men found her inconvenient? A socialist parliamentarian took up Matachich's cause, arguing that his trial had been a sham, his conviction political rather than just. In 1902, Matacich was pardoned and released after serving 4 years. And immediately, he began planning something impossible. He was going to free Louise. Matacich tried to visit Louise at Lindenhof, but the staff turned him away. So he began a campaign of psychological warfare and hope. He would ride his bicycle past Louise's carriage during her supervised outings, a silent reminder that he hadn't abandoned her. Once, during a carriage ride, a boy threw a note onto Louise's lap. It read simply, "Hope." Louise knew then that he was planning something. For months, she heard nothing more. The silence was torture. Then finally, Matacich learned that Louise would be allowed to travel to Bad Elster, a spa town in Saxony, for a therapeutic cure. The surveillance would be lighter there. It was the chance he'd been waiting for. Through an elaborate network of bribed servants and sympathizers, Matacich got a message to Louise in her hotel room. It was delivered by a waiter who was secretly part of the plot. The note read, "It will happen tomorrow." On the night of August 31st, 1904, Louise waited anxiously in her room with her little dog, Kiki. She'd packed only what she could carry without raising suspicion. At 1 a.m., someone knocked on her door. It was the night porter, another conspirator. He told her to be ready. At 2:30 a.m., he returned. He led her down through the silent hotel, every footstep a risk, every shadow a potential betrayal. On the ground floor, waiting in the darkness, was Matacich. After 6 years of separation, 6 years of imprisonment and desperation, they were finally together again. They fled into the night, escaping across borders in a journey that would take them through Germany and into France. At one point, crossing Belgium by train, the ticket controller recognized Louise. She froze, certain they would be caught. But the man simply smiled, promised he wouldn't call the police, and let them pass. Even strangers pitied the imprisoned princess. They arrived in Paris and checked into the Westminster Hotel. Louise was free. But freedom came with a terrible price. She had escaped the asylum, but she couldn't escape the scandal that had put her there. Louise's freedom was fragile and complicated. Medical experts in France examined her and declared that there was no reason for her confinement, that she was completely sane. But the damage to her reputation was irreversible. Her husband began divorce proceedings. Her father, Leopold II, now had the perfect excuse to disinherit her. When he drew up his will, leaving his enormous fortune to his mistress and a royal trust, Louise's name was nowhere to be found. The divorce was finalized in 1906, almost 8 years after Louise had left Philip. She was free of her marriage, but she had lost everything else: her children, her inheritance, her titles, protections, her homeland. Both Belgium and Austria refused to issue her a passport. She was stateless, homeless, a royal in name only. Louise and Stephanie, who had also been disinherited after Rudolph's death at Meierling, sued the Belgian government for their share of their father's estate. The trial was sensational. Their lawyer presented the case with such passion that the audience wept. But they lost. The court sided with the dead king. As one newspaper wrote bitterly, "The king does not have a heart of stone. His heart is of gold, which is harder than stone." Under public pressure, the Belgian government eventually agreed to give the disinherited princesses a substantial sum, but World War I delayed the payment for years. Meanwhile, Louise and Matachich lived a precarious existence across Europe, Paris, Berlin, Budapest, always moving, always in debt, always one step ahead of creditors. The relationship that had seemed so romantic in 1895 had curdled into something complicated and painful. Matachich, it turned out, had not been faithful during Louise's imprisonment. Maria Stöger, the woman who had helped engineer Louise's escape, was actually Matachich's mistress. She had left her husband and 7-year-old son to be with him, even giving birth to his illegitimate child. After the escape, she followed them to Paris, and the three lived together in what could only be called a ménage à trois. Louise, who had given up everything for love, now found herself just one of Matachich's lovers. But she was trapped. She had nowhere else to go. No family would take her in. No country would claim her. She was a princess in exile, surviving on diminished funds and memories of what might have been. During World War I, because they were living in Germany, Louise was interned as an enemy alien. Her father died in 1909 without ever reconciling with her. Her mother had died years earlier, still heartbroken over her wild daughter. When the war finally ended, Louise received some of the money the Belgian government had promised, but by then she had accumulated new debts that consumed most of it. In 1921, Louise published her memoirs, Autour des trônes que j'ai vu tomber, Around the Thrones That I Saw Fall. The book was her attempt to vindicate herself, to tell her side of the story, to exact revenge on the father who had abandoned her and the courts that had imprisoned her. Strangely, she dedicated it to Leopold II, calling him the great man, the great king, who was my father. Even in bitterness, she couldn't quite let go of the fantasy of a father who had loved her. The memoirs created another scandal. She took swipes at everyone: her husband, her family, the Habsburg court. She claimed Archduke Ludwig Victor had betrayed her out of romantic spite, not knowing, or not caring, that he was openly homosexual and had no interest in women. Her facts were often wrong, her tone often self-serving. But beneath the melodrama, there was truth. She had been locked away not because she was mad, but because she was inconvenient. In 1923, Matachich's health failed. He died in Paris in the autumn, leaving Louise truly alone for the first time in decades. She moved to Wiesbaden, Germany, living in poverty in a small apartment. The woman who had once dazzled Vienna, who had lived in palaces and commanded fortunes, spent her final days scraping by on charity from her sister Stephanie. On March 1st, 1924, at the age of 66, Louise died alone. There was no royal funeral, no state mourning, just a quiet burial and the end of a life that had been equal parts fairy tale and nightmare. Her only surviving child was Dorothea, whom she hadn't seen in decades. The major memorial she left behind was Avenue Louise in Brussels, the grand boulevard named after her in childhood, when the world still believed she might become something glorious. Throughout history, royal women have been taught one lesson above all others: obedience. Obey your parents. Obey your husband. Obey the rules of the court. Accept your cage and smile while doing it. But Princess Louise of Belgium refused to smile. She refused to obey. And for that defiance, she paid a price that few can imagine. Was she mad, as the doctors claimed? Or was she simply a woman born into the wrong century, unwilling to accept the suffocating limitations placed on her gender and her rank? The psychiatric reports from 1904 to 1905, after her escape, concluded that there was no reason for her internment. She had never been insane. She had been imprisoned because powerful men, her father, her husband, an emperor, found her behavior intolerable. Her crime was not madness. It was wanting to choose her own life. It was leaving a husband who disgusted her. It was loving a man her family deemed inappropriate. It was spending money and having affairs and refusing to be quiet and obedient and good. And for these crimes, she was locked away for 6 years, declared incompetent, stripped of her children and her inheritance, and left to die in poverty. But here's what they couldn't take from her: her story. Louise refused to disappear. She wrote her memoirs. She fought in court. She survived decades of exile and hardship, refusing to be broken by the system that had tried to erase her. She became a warning to other royal women. This is what happens when you defy the rules. But she also became something else: proof that even in gilded cages, even behind asylum walls, some spirits cannot be crushed. The world that imprisoned Louise is gone now. The Habsburg Empire fell. The Belgian colonial atrocities her father committed are finally being reckoned with. The asylums that warehoused inconvenient women have been closed. But her story remains, a reminder that the line between sanity and madness, between freedom and imprisonment, has never been about mental health. It's always been about power. And Princess Louise of Belgium, for all her flaws and all her mistakes, had the courage to challenge that power. It destroyed her, but she refused to be forgotten. The princess who chose love over duty died alone, but she died free. Louise's story isn't just a piece of royal history gathering dust in archives. It's a stark reminder that family secrets, silenced scandals, and inconvenient truths don't stay buried forever. Behind every ornate palace door, there are stories like Louise's, lives destroyed by reputation, women erased by declarations of madness, love turned into scandal. If you enjoyed uncovering the truth about Princess Louise's imprisoned years, then you're going to want to stick around. Here at the Forgotten Court, we expose the scandals they tried to bury. The mad queens who weren't mad, the locked-away royals, the forbidden romances that threatened empires. So hit that subscribe button. Because next time, we're diving into another Habsburg secret so explosive, it nearly destroyed the dynasty from within. And trust me, what we uncover next will make Louise's story look like just the beginning. The palace has more secrets, and we're just getting started.